The millionaire arrived at the nursing home to make a donation, but fell to his knees when he found his mother, who had been missing for 30 years. The morning sun gleamed off the glass facade of Morgan Tower, a 70-story monument to one man's ambition. Inside his penthouse office, James Morgan stood with his back to the panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, a view that most would kill for, but that he barely noticed anymore. "The Henderson merger is locked in," he said into his phone, his voice carrying the confident edge that had become his trademark in boardrooms across the country. "Tell their lawyers they can either sign by noon or watch their stock plummet when news breaks that we've walked." He ended the call without waiting for a response. At 45, James had the kind of success that business magazines fawned over. His salt and pepper hair and tailored suits projected the image of the quintessential American success story. What those glossy features failed to capture was the emptiness that followed him like a shadow. His assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Mr. Bailey is here for your 9 o'clock. James pressed a button. "Send him in." Robert Bailey entered with the confident stride of a man who had survived 15 years as the right hand to one of the most demanding CEOs in Chicago. "Morning, James. Coffee's on your desk. Black, no sugar, as usual." "What's on the agenda today?" James asked, not bothering with pleasantries. They had long ago dispensed with those. Robert flipped through his tablet. "Board wants preliminary numbers on the Henderson acquisition. Legal needs signatures on the Tokyo property. Oh, and PR is breathing down my neck about the charity initiative." James grimaced. "Tell them I signed the checks." "Isn't that enough?" "It's not about the money," Robert said, settling into one of the leather chairs. "It's about optics. The James Morgan that the public sees is efficient, successful, wealthy," James offered. "Distant, cold, perhaps even—" Robert hesitated. "Slightly inhuman." James snorted. "Since when did making money require being warm and fuzzy?" "Since you started buying up media companies," Robert countered. "The public scrutiny is different now. People want to relate to the man behind the empire." James walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city below for a moment. He was 6 years old again, pressing his face against the glass of his father's office, trying to spot their house in the distance while his father conducted important business. The memory came with the familiar sting that always accompanied thoughts of his childhood. "What exactly are you suggesting?" James finally asked. "Something more personal than writing checks. A public appearance. The Santa Esperanza nursing home renovation you funded is complete. A visit there would make for good press, showing the human side of James Morgan." James turned, his expression hardening. "I don't do photo ops with the elderly." "Robert, it's not just a photo op. It's showing that you care about something beyond quarterly reports. One morning, James, shake a few hands, take a few pictures, and your PR problem disappears." As much as he hated to admit it, Robert had a point. The media had been particularly brutal lately, painting him as some sort of modern-day Scrooge. It wasn't that he cared what they wrote, but negative press could affect investor confidence. "Fine," James conceded. "Set it up, but I'm in and out in an hour, understood?" Robert nodded, hiding his surprise at the easy victory. Crystal clear, after Robert left. James moved to his desk, an imposing slab of black marble. On it sat the only personal item in the entire office, a small wooden music box. It was a simple thing, worn with age, its once bright paint now faded. He ran his thumb over the lid but didn't open it. He never opened it here. The box was one of the few possessions he had from before his mother walked out. Before his life became divided into then and now, Thomas Morgan had never thrown it away, despite erasing every other trace of her from their lives. Perhaps it had been an oversight, or perhaps in some small way, his father had wanted him to have something of hers. James pulled his hand away as if the box had suddenly burned him. These thoughts were useless, a weakness he couldn't afford. His mother had made her choice 39 years ago. She had walked away from a 6-year-old boy without so much as a goodbye, leaving nothing but questions and a hollowness that no amount of success seemed to fill. The intercom buzzed again. "Your 10 o'clock conference call is ready, Mr. Morgan. Put them through," he said, straightening his tie and tucking away the memories along with the emotions they stirred. That evening, James sat alone in his penthouse apartment, 20 floors above his office. The space was immaculate. All clean lines, modern furniture, and strategic lighting that had been featured in architectural magazines like his office. It contained almost nothing personal. It wasn't a home so much as a place where he slept. He poured himself 2 fingers of 30-year-old scotch and carried the glass to the window. Chicago sprawled before him, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there were families gathering for dinner, couples walking hand in hand, children being tucked into bed, normal lives filled with the kinds of connections that James had convinced himself he didn't need. Money was reliable in a way that people weren't. It didn't walk away. It didn't promise to always be there and then disappear without explanation. His father had taught him that lesson well. The only thing you can count on in this world is what you build for yourself, Thomas Morgan had said after his wife's departure, words that became a mantra for both father and son. And James had built something remarkable, a financial empire that spanned continents. Yet on nights like this, in the silence of his perfectly appointed apartment, he sometimes wondered what it was all for. The thought irritated him, like a pebble in his shoe that he couldn't dislodge. His phone rang. Breaking the silence, the screen displayed Robert's name. "A bit late for business calls, isn't it?" James answered. "Just confirming tomorrow's schedule. Car will pick you up at 9 for the nursing home visit. Should take about an hour. Then you're straight to the Henderson meeting." "Fine." There was a pause on the line. "You know, James, this nursing home, it's actually quite a remarkable place. The director there, Martha Gonzalez, has done wonders with the funding you provided. I'm sure the PR team will make sure I know all the talking points," James said dismissively. "Right?" Robert replied, his tone cooling slightly. "See you tomorrow, then." After hanging up, James drained his glass and set it down harder than necessary. He didn't need Robert's thinly veiled criticism. The nursing home was just business, a tax write-off, and now, apparently, a PR opportunity. Nothing more. Tomorrow would be a waste of time, but a necessary one. He'd smile for the cameras, shake hands with the appropriate people, and be on his way. Just another transaction. Nothing personal. That was how James Morgan operated. That was how he had built his empire. That was how he had survived. The sleek black Bentley looked out of place as it glided through the modest neighborhood on Chicago's west side. James glanced out the window, noting the stark contrast between downtown's gleaming skyscrapers and these streets lined with small businesses and weathered apartment buildings. "We're 5 minutes out," his driver announced. James straightened his already perfect tie. "Remind me again how long I need to be here." "Mr. Bailey scheduled 1 hour," the driver replied. "The press will be there for the first 30 minutes. James nodded, mentally rehearsing the talking points Robert had emailed him that morning. This was just another business transaction. Smile, shake hands, say the right words, and leave, the sooner it started. The sooner it would be over. The car pulled up to Santa Esperanza Nursing Home. The building was modest but well-maintained, with freshly painted walls and new landscaping. Improvements funded by the Morgan Foundation's donation. A small group waited outside, a middle-aged woman in professional attire, a couple of staff members in scrubs, and predictably photographers from local media outlets. As soon as he stepped out of the car, camera flashes began popping. James put on what Robert called his public smile, confident but not arrogant, friendly but not overly familiar. The woman in the professional attire stepped forward, hand extended. "Mr. Morgan, I'm Marta Gonzalez, director of Santa Esperanza. It's an honor to finally meet you in person." Her handshake was firm, her eyes direct. James recognized competence when he saw it. "Miss Gonzalez, your reputation precedes you." It wasn't just a platitude. Robert had briefed him on her background, 25 years in elder care. The last 10 transforming Santa Esperanza from a facility on the verge of closure into one of the city's most respected nursing homes. "Please call me Marta," she said, gesturing toward the entrance. "We're so excited to show you how your donation has improved our residents' lives." The tour was exactly what James expected, a series of photo opportunities as Marta showcased the renovated dining hall, the new physical therapy room, and the updated resident quarters. He shook hands, smiled for cameras, and delivered practice sound bites about community responsibility and the Morgan Foundation's commitment to supporting vulnerable populations. What he hadn't expected was the genuine warmth with which the staff and residents greeted him. There was nothing performative about it. These people were sincerely grateful. It was unsettling in a way he couldn't quite articulate. "And this is our recreation room," Marta said, leading him into a spacious, sun-filled room where several residents were engaged in various activities. "We've been able to expand our music therapy program thanks to your donation." James nodded politely, calculating how much longer until he could leave when a soft, melodic humming caught his attention. The sound cut through the room's ambient noise like a knife, stopping his thoughts mid-calculation. At the far end of the room, an elderly woman sat in a rocking chair by the window, humming as her fingers worked rhythmically on a small knitting project. The tune was simple, just a few repeating notes, but James felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He knew that melody. It was the same one from the music box in his office, the one his mother used to hum to him before bed, the one he sometimes still heard in his dreams. "Mr. Morgan," Marta's voice seemed to come from far away. "Would you like to meet some of our residents?" "Who is that?" James asked abruptly, nodding toward the woman by the window. Marta followed his gaze. "That's Evelyn. She's been with us about 15 years now, one of our long-term residents." "Evelyn what?" His tone was sharper than he intended, if Marta noticed his sudden intensity. She didn't comment on it. "Just Evelyn. As far as our records show, she came to us with some memory issues, and over the years, they've progressed. She rarely has visitors, but she's beloved by everyone here. Would you like to meet her?" Before James could answer, a staff member approached, whispering something in Marta's ear. She nodded and turned back to James. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Morgan, but there's a minor situation I need to address. Would you mind if Clara shows you the rest of the facility? I'll rejoin you shortly." James barely heard her. "Actually, I'd like a moment alone, if you don't mind." Marta looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. Take your time. Clara will be just outside when you're ready to continue." As Marta and the staff member left, James stood rooted to the spot, watching the woman, Evelyn, as she continued to rock and hum, the melody wrapped around him, pulling at something deep and long buried. It couldn't be her. It was impossible his mother had left, abandoned him and his father. Thomas had been clear about that. She'd chosen a new life, one that didn't include her son, yet he found himself moving toward her, drawn by some force he couldn't name. Evelyn looked up as he approached, her weathered face creasing into a gentle smile. Her eyes were a faded blue, clouded slightly with age, but there was warmth in them. "Hello?" she said, her voice soft and slightly tremulous. "Hello?" James replied, surprised at how unsteady his own voice sounded. "That song you were humming, it's lovely." Her smile widened. "Is it? I don't remember where I learned it, but it always makes me feel..." She paused, searching for the word. "Safe." Up close, he could see that her hands were marked with age spots, the skin tissue thin over blue veins. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and she wore a cardigan despite the warmth of the room. There was nothing in her features that triggered recognition. Why would there be, after nearly 4 decades? But something about her smile nagged at him. "Do you have children?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. A shadow passed over her face. "I had a little boy once." Her fingers stopped their knitting, resting momentarily in her lap. He had the most beautiful laugh. James felt something constrict in his chest. What happened to him? Evelyn's gaze drifted to the window, to the world outside. "I don't remember," she said softly, pain evident in her voice. "Sometimes I think he's waiting for me somewhere, other times." She shook her head slightly. "The doctors say my memories get mixed up, that I confuse dreams with reality. Mr. Morgan," Clara's voice called from the doorway. "The press would like a few more photos before they leave." James turned, annoyed at the interruption. "I'll be right there," he said, more curtly than necessary, when he looked back at Evelyn. She had returned to her knitting, the melody once again on her lips, as if their conversation had never happened. "It was nice meeting you, Evelyn," he said quietly. She looked up, her smile polite but vacant. "You too, young man." There was no recognition in her eyes, no indication that she remembered their brief exchange from moments ago. As James walked away, the melody followed him, stirring questions he'd long ago stopped asking. James barely remembered the rest of the nursing home tour. He moved through it mechanically, shaking hands and nodding at appropriate intervals, but his mind remained fixed on the woman in the rocking chair. "You seem distracted," Robert commented as they rode back to Morgan Tower. "Was it that bad?" James stared out the window. There was a resident there, an elderly woman named Evelyn. And, Robert prompted when James didn't continue, she was humming a song. James tapped his fingers against his knee. A song my mother used to hum to me. Robert raised an eyebrow. That's quite a coincidence. Is it? James turned to him. What do we know about Santa Esperanza's admission records? Who reviews the background of their residents? I'd have to check with the foundation team, Robert replied, studying James with growing curiosity. Why the sudden interest? James waved away the question. Just wondering how thorough their vetting process is. Make sure the money we're giving them is being used properly. As soon as they reached his office, James closed the door and pulled out his phone. David, it's Morgan, he said when the call connected. I need you to look into something for me, discreetly. David Chen had been his go-to private investigator for years, handling everything from background checks on potential business partners to more delicate matters that required absolute discretion. I'm listening, David said. There's a resident at Santa Esperanza nursing home. First name Evelyn, last name unknown. She's been there approximately 15 years. I need everything you can find on her. When she was admitted, by whom, where she came from, medical records if you can get them. May I ask what this is about? No, James replied curtly. Just find what you can. Priority status. After ending the call, James unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk and removed the wooden music box. He rarely opened it. The memories were too sharp, too painful. But now he turned the small brass key and lifted the lid. The tinkling melody filled the office, the same notes Evelyn had been humming. Inside lay a child's treasures, a small blue toy car, a polished stone, and a faded photograph of a young woman holding a toddler. The woman's face was partially obscured as she looked down at the child, but her smile was visible, warm and loving. James closed the box abruptly, the melody cutting off mid-note. He was being ridiculous. The song wasn't unique. It was probably a common lullaby. And even if by some astronomical coincidence this Evelyn had once known his mother, what did it matter? His mother had made her choice decades ago, yet the thought nagged at him like a splinter he couldn't extract. 3 days passed before David called back. James was reviewing acquisition documents when his private line rang. I've got preliminary information on your nursing home resident, David said without preamble. James set down his pen. Go ahead. Evelyn. No last name on record. Admitted to Santa Esperanza in 2009. The paperwork is interesting. David paused. The admission forms were signed by a legal guardian, but there's no documentation establishing guardianship. Medical history is sparse. Notes dementia and memory issues, but no detailed diagnosis. No listed family members. Who was this supposed guardian? A law firm signed the papers. Whitmore, Prescott and Hayes. James felt his spine stiffen. Whitmore, Prescott and Hayes had been his father's law firm for decades. Gerald Hayes had handled Thomas Morgan's estate after his death 5 years ago, and still managed some of the family's legal matters. There's something else, David continued. I managed to get access to some of her medical files. The dementia diagnosis came after her admission, not before, and there are some irregularities in her medication history. Consistent prescriptions for sedatives that seem excessive for her condition. You're saying someone's been keeping her medicated. I'm saying the records don't add up. David's voice was careful, neutral. There's one more thing. I found an old driver's license in her admission paperwork. The name on it is Evelyn Morgan. The room seemed to tilt slightly. James gripped the edge of his desk. Send me everything you have, and David, this stays between us. After hanging up, James sat motionless, his mind racing. Could it be possible? Had his father lied to him all these years? No, there had to be another explanation. Morgan wasn't an uncommon name. This had to be a coincidence, albeit an unsettling one. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Hayes is here to see you, his assistant announced. James froze. He hadn't summoned Gerald Hayes. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Send him in, James replied, quickly closing the files on his desk. Gerald Hayes entered with the confidence of a man who had known James since childhood. In his 70s now, Hayes still cut an imposing figure. Tall, silver-haired with the sharp eyes of a predator. James, my boy, hope I'm not interrupting. His voice carried the polished tones of old money and Ivy League education. Gerald, this is unexpected. James gestured to a chair. but remained standing himself. Hayes settled into the leather seat. I was in the building for another matter and thought I'd stop by. I saw the press coverage of your nursing home visit. Quite a picker-coup. James studied the older man's face, searching for any sign that this was more than a casual visit. Just doing my civic duty. Your father would be proud. He always stressed the importance of maintaining the right public image. Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. How did you find the facility? Santa Esperanza, wasn't it? Adequate. They're making good use of the foundation's money. Hayes nodded slowly. I handled some paperwork for them years ago. Pro bono work, helping the less fortunate and all that. The casual mention was too deliberate to be innocent. James maintained his neutral expression. Is there something specific you wanted to discuss, Gerald? I have a meeting in 15 minutes. Nothing pressing. Hayes rose to his feet. Just checking in on Thomas's boy. I promised him I'd keep an eye on you, you know. I've been managing just fine. Hayes placed a hand on James's shoulder. Indeed you have. Your father built something remarkable, but you've taken it to new heights. His grip tightened slightly. He wanted to protect you, James. Everything he did was to make you stronger. The words seemed loaded with meaning beyond their surface. James carefully removed the older man's hand from his shoulder. I appreciate the sentiment, Gerald, but, as I said, I have a meeting. After Hayes left, James sat at his desk, turning over the conversation in his mind. It hadn't been a casual visit. It had been a warning. Somehow Hayes knew about his interest in Evelyn. Robert knocked and entered without waiting for a response. His expression concerned. Hayes just left. What did he want? To take my temperature, James replied. Robert, I need you to free up my schedule for tomorrow afternoon. The Henderson meeting? Reschedule it. Robert frowned. What's going on, James? First the nursing home resident, now canceling priority meetings. This isn't like you. James considered his options. Robert had been his right hand for 15 years, loyal to a fault. If what he suspected was true, he would need an ally. Close the door, James said finally. There's something I need to look into, and I may need your help. As Robert sat down, James opened his computer to the files David had sent. I think my father may have lied to me about everything. The following afternoon, James found himself back at Santa Esperanza. He'd told Marta Gonzalez he was conducting a personal follow-up on the foundation's investment if she found his sudden interest suspicious. She didn't show it. We're honored to have you back so soon, Mr. Morgan, she said, leading him through the facility's sunlit corridors. The residents haven't stopped talking about your visit. I was impressed with your operation, James replied, his eyes scanning for Evelyn. Particularly your long-term care programs, Marta beamed. That's our specialty. Many of our residents have been with us for years. We become like family. Speaking of which, James kept his tone casual. I was particularly interested in one of your residents. Evelyn, I believe. The woman who was knitting by the window. Something flickered across Marta's face. Caution. Perhaps? Yes, Evelyn. She's one of our longest residents. She hesitated. May I ask why you're interested in her specifically? She reminded me of someone, James said truthfully. Is she in the recreation room today? Actually, she's in the garden. She enjoys the afternoons out there when weather permits. They found Evelyn seated on a bench beneath a maple tree, her face tilted toward the sun. Unlike before, she wasn't knitting or humming, just sitting quietly with her eyes closed. Would you like me to introduce you properly? Marta asked. If you don't mind, I'd prefer a few moments alone, James replied. I find it easier to connect with people one-on-one. Marta nodded, though her expression remained guarded. Of course. I'll be inside if you need anything. James approached slowly, taking the moment to study Evelyn more carefully. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, thin gold bands on several fingers. One in particular caught his eye, a simple ring with a small blue stone. His breath caught in his throat. His mother had worn a ring just like it. He could picture it moving gracefully as she tucked him into bed. Good afternoon, he said softly, not wanting to startle her. Evelyn's eyes opened, the same faded blue he remembered from their previous encounter. She blinked at him, confusion crossing her features before settling into a polite smile. Hello there, she said. Are you new here? Just visiting, James replied, taking a seat beside her, but not too close. We met the other day. I'm James. Did we? I'm sorry. I don't always remember things well. She extended a fragile hand. I'm Evelyn. The simple introduction, her name with no surname attached, sent a pang through him. Had she forgotten her last name? Or had it been deliberately stripped from her? It's a beautiful day, he offered, not knowing how to proceed. Yes, she agreed, looking up at the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. I love the way the light changes. Reminds me of a place. She trailed off, her brow furrowing with the effort of recollection. What place? James prompted gently. A lake house, I think. Long ago. Her eyes took on a distant quality. There was a dock with a little boat and a child. She smiled suddenly. A little boy who loved to throw stones in the water. James's heart hammered in his chest. His family had owned a lake house in Michigan. He had vague memories of summers there before his mother left. This boy, he said carefully. Was he your son? Evelyn's smile faltered. I had a son once. They told me he died. Her hand moved to her heart. But that doesn't feel right, here. It feels like he's still... She shook her head, as if clearing away cobwebs. The doctors say I get confused. Who told you your son died? James asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. His father, Evelyn replied, her gaze dropping to her hands. At least, I think that's what happened. Some days I remember it differently. James leaned closer. How do you remember it on those days? Her eyes met his, a flash of clarity amid the confusion. That he took my boy away. That he said I wasn't fit to be a mother. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That I'd never see my Jamie again. Jamie, the nickname only his mother had used. Before James could respond, a nurse approached. Time for your medication, Evelyn. Evelyn's face immediately smoothed into compliant pleasantness. Already, the afternoon went by so quickly. The nurse, a stern-looking woman James hadn't seen during his tour, glanced at him with undisguised suspicion. I don't believe we've met. Are you a family member? A donor to the facility, James replied, standing. Just getting to know some of the residents. Well, Evelyn needs her rest now. The nurse handed Evelyn a small paper cup containing several pills and a glass of water. James watched as Evelyn dutifully swallowed the medication. What is she taking? The nurse's smile tightened. I'm afraid that's confidential information, sir. HIPAA regulations. Of course. James handed the woman his business card. James Morgan, if there's anything Evelyn needs that the facility doesn't provide, please let me know. Recognition flashed in the nurse's eyes. Mr. Morgan? Yes. We're all very grateful for your foundation's support. Evelyn had already closed her eyes again, the medication working quickly. James hesitated, then gently touched her hand. I'll visit again soon, Evelyn. She murmured something unintelligible. Already drifting off, James found Marta in her office, reviewing paperwork. Ms. Gonzalez, I'd like to see Evelyn's medical records. Marta looked up, startled. I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, but that's not possible without proper authorization. Patient confidentiality. I understand, James interrupted. James, but I have reason to believe there might be irregularities in her care. Marta's expression shifted from surprise to wariness. What kind of irregularities? Excessive medication, for one. James took a seat across from her desk. How well do you know Evelyn's history? Marta sighed, removing her glasses. Not as well as I should. She was here before I took over as director. Her paperwork has always been unusual. She seemed to be weighing her words carefully. I've tried to get more comprehensive medical evaluations, but her legal guardian has specific directives about her care. Gerald Hayes, James said. Marta's eyebrows rose. Yes. How did you know? Because he works for me, or rather, he worked for my father. James leaned forward. Marta, I need to know everything about Evelyn's time here, not as a donor, but as someone who might be personally connected to her. Understanding dawned in Marta's eyes. You think she's related to you. I think she might be my mother. The words hung in the air, the first time he'd spoken this suspicion aloud. And I think my father and Hayes conspired to hide her here, to make me believe she abandoned me. Marta was silent for a long moment. If what you're suggesting is true, then someone has been maintaining this deception for years, manipulating her care, her medication. Will you help me find out? Marta nodded slowly. There's a night clerk who's been here since before my time, Carlos. He might know more about her admission. She checked her watch. He comes in at 11. If you come back then, we can speak with him privately. As James left the facility, a text from Robert appeared on his phone. Hayes asked it for access to your email records. Said it was for compliance review. I blocked it. What's going on? James typed a quick reply. They know I'm digging. Meet me at my place tonight. I'm going to need backup. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture James could barely comprehend. A lifetime built on lies. A mother who hadn't abandoned him but had been taken from him. And his father, the man he'd idolized despite his coldness, at the center of it all. The drive back to his penthouse felt interminable. James's mind raced, connecting dots that had been scattered throughout his life. His father's refusal to ever discuss his mother. The way Thomas had methodically erased every trace of her from their home. The cold anger that emerged whenever young James asked questions about her. Robert was waiting when he arrived, looking troubled. Hayes has been making calls all afternoon. I had Emily in it monitor his office line. Legal? James asked, pouring them both a drink. Not remotely, Robert replied, accepting the glass. But given what you've told me, I figured we're past following protocol. James nodded, grateful for Robert's loyalty. What did she find? 3 calls to the nursing home, 2 to someone named Davis. The nurse who gave Evelyn her medication, James interrupted, and 1 to a board member of your foundation, Stanley Williams. James cursed softly. Williams was one of his father's oldest friends, installed on the foundation board as a courtesy after Thomas died. They're circling the wagons. James, Robert said carefully, what exactly do you think happened? Instead of answering, James crossed to a painting on the wall, an abstract his decorator had selected. Behind it was a wall safe. He entered the combination and removed a small brass key. My father's study has been locked since he died, James explained, leading Robert to a door at the end of the hallway. I never had any interest in going through his things. The key turned smoothly in the lock. James flipped on the light, revealing a room that seemed frozen in time. Heavy mahogany furniture, leather-bound books, the lingering scent of cigars. It was as if Thomas Morgan had just stepped out momentarily. What are we looking for? Robert asked, taking in the imposing space. I don't know, James admitted. But if my father kept records of what he did, they'd be here. They began systematically searching the room, checking drawers, examining books for hidden compartments, searching behind paintings. An hour passed with nothing to show for their efforts. There has to be something, James muttered, frustration mounting. He ran his hand along the underside of the massive desk, feeling for anything unusual. His fingers found a small irregularity, a button, nearly flush with the wood. He pressed it. A soft click came from the bookcase behind the desk. One section had popped forward slightly. Hidden compartment, Robert said, moving to help slide the section aside. Inside was a row of leather-bound journals, each dated on the spine, spanning nearly 2 decades. James lifted out the earliest one, dated 1985, the year he turned 6, the year his mother disappeared. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. June 12, 1985. He has become increasingly difficult about the boy. Insists on taking him to that dilapidated lake house her parents left her. Claims it's important for children to know their roots. As if his future lies in some lower-class summer cottage rather than in the empire I've built. When I marry the woman, not her family or their shabby history. James felt his chest tighten as he continued reading. July 8, 1985. Another argument about the boy's education. It wants him in public school. Claims it will make him well-rounded. As if I would allow a Morgan to mingle with common children. She doesn't understand what it takes to succeed in this world. Sentiment is a luxury we cannot afford. August 22, 1985. Hayes has prepared the papers. It's the only solution now. He has become unpredictable, threatening to take the boy away. She actually used the word divorce, as if she could ever survive without the Morgan name and money. I won't allow her to ruin everything I've built, or to contaminate the boy with her weak-minded values. James flipped through the pages, his hands moving faster as the entries grew darker. September 3, 1985. It's done, doctor. Porter administered the medication as arranged. Hayes handled the paperwork. She'll be comfortable but contained at the Westlake facility. Legal guardianship has been transferred to me exclusively. The official story is that she abandoned us. A narrative that serves our purposes, the boy cried tonight, asking for her. This weakness will pass. The journal slipped from James's hands. Hitting the floor with a dull thud, Robert picked it up, his face pale as he scanned the entry. Jesus, he whispered. James, Get me the others. James cut him off, his voice hollow. All of them. The sun was rising by the time they finished reading. The journals documented everything. Thomas's arrangement with Hayes to have Evelyn declared mentally unfit. The falsified papers. The bribes to medical staff. The carefully constructed lie of abandonment that James had believed his entire life. When Westlake facility closed in 2009, Thomas had arranged Evelyn's transfer to Santa Esperanza, maintaining the same regimen of medication to keep her pliant and confused. Her memories fragmented. He was obsessed with controlling your future, Robert said quietly, after they'd read the final entry. Convinced her common background would make you weak. James sat motionless, the weight of the truth crushing down on him. His entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. Every memory of his mother was colored by the belief that she had abandoned him, a belief his father had meticulously cultivated. I hated her, James said, his voice barely audible. For decades, I hated her for walking away. I blamed her for every failed relationship, every time I couldn't connect with someone. And all that time she was... His voice broke. Robert placed a hand on his shoulder. What are you going to do? James looked up, a cold clarity replacing the shock. First, I'm going to make sure she's safe. Hayes and his people won't hesitate to move her if they think I'm getting close to the truth. He stood, suddenly energized by purpose. Call David. I want round-the-clock security at Santa Esperanza, starting immediately. And then I'm going to take everything apart, James said, a dangerous edge to his voice. The lies, the conspiracy, all of it, starting with Hayes. He'll fight back, Robert warned. These journals show a conspiracy involving multiple people, some of whom still sit on your board. Let them fight, James replied. I'm my father's son in one respect. I know how to win a war. He picked up the earliest journal again, turning to an entry he'd noticed earlier. October 15th, 1985. The boy asked again today where his mother went. I told him she chose to leave, that some people aren't meant to be parents, he cried. But less than before, eventually, he'll forget. Children are resilient that way. What matters is that he'll grow up with the proper Morgan values, without her softness undermining everything. One day he'll understand that I did this for him. The words blurred as unexpected tears filled James's eyes. She never left me, he whispered. She never chose to go. All those years of feeling abandoned, of building walls around himself, of believing he wasn't worthy of being loved. All of it based on his father's lies. The revelation wasn't just shocking. It was transformative, rearranging everything he thought he knew about himself. I need to see her, James said suddenly, checking his watch. It was barely 6 a.m. I need to talk to Marta and that night clerk, Carlos. What will you tell Evelyn? Robert asked. James had no answer. How do you tell a woman with fragile memories that you're the son she was told had died? How do you begin to repair damage that spans nearly 4 decades? The truth, he finally said. Or as much of it as she can handle. I owe her that much. As they left Thomas's study, James carried one of the journals with him, physical proof of the betrayal that had shaped his life. His father had stolen his mother from him, and in doing so, had stolen a part of James himself. It was time to reclaim it. By mid-morning, James and Robert had established a security perimeter at Santa Esperanza. David Chen positioned 2 of his most trusted operatives as maintenance contractors, ensuring Evelyn wouldn't be moved without their knowledge. Hayes called the facility 3 more times this morning, Robert reported as they sat in James's office. He also tried to schedule an emergency board meeting for the foundation. James nodded grimly. He's getting desperate, he knows what I've found. He placed his father's journal on the desk between them. We need to talk about what happens next. This isn't just about Hayes. There are board members involved, doctors, administrators who've been complicit for decades. Robert leaned forward. James, before we go nuclear, are you sure this is what you want? The fallout will be massive. The Morgan name, James interrupted, is built on a lie. Everything my father built. Everything I thought I was continuing. It all started with him destroying my mother's life. His voice hardened. I don't care about the fallout. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hayes is here. He says it's urgent. James and Robert exchanged looks. Well, that was faster than expected, Robert muttered. Send him in, James directed, sliding the journal into his desk drawer. Gerald Hayes entered, impeccably dressed as always. But James noticed something he'd never seen before. A tension around the older man's eyes, a tightness to his smile. James, we need to talk, Hayes said, ignoring Robert's presence. In private. Robert stays, James replied coldly. Have a seat, Gerald. Hayes remained standing. I understand you've been visiting Santa Esperanza quite frequently, developing a special interest in their operation. Cut the bullshit. Gerald, I know about my mother. A flicker of something. Fear crossed Hayes's face before his lawyerly mask slipped back into place. Your mother abandoned you and your father decades ago. It was a painful time for... James opened the drawer and tossed the journal onto the desk. My father's own words. Detailed accounts of how you helped him declare her mentally incompetent, how you falsified documents, how you've maintained this fiction for nearly 40 years. Hayes didn't touch the journal. Instead, he straightened his tie, a nervous habit James had never noticed before. Thomas did what was necessary, Hayes said finally. Your mother was unstable, threatening to take you away from everything you deserved. He protected you. By drugging her, by locking her away. James stood, rage burning through him. By telling me she abandoned me, making me believe she didn't love me enough to stay. She wasn't worthy of the Morgan name, Hayes snapped, his composure cracking. She was common, from nothing. Thomas had a vision for this family. For you, she would have ruined everything. Robert stood now too. You realize what you're admitting to. Unlawful imprisonment, medical fraud, financial crimes. I'm admitting to helping build the empire you now control. Hayes shot back at James. Everything you have, every advantage, every opportunity, came from decisions Thomas and I made to secure your future. My future. James's voice was dangerously quiet. You stole my mother from me. You left her to rot in facilities while feeding her drugs to keep her confused and compliant. You told me she chose to leave me. Hayes's expression hardened. It was the right decision. Look at what you've become. One of the most powerful men in Chicago. Would that have happened if you'd been raised by some emotional woman with no understanding of what it takes to succeed in this world? James moved with a speed that surprised even himself in 2 strides. He was around the desk, his hand closing around Hayes's silk tie, yanking the older man close. Her name is Evelyn Morgan, James growled, and she's twice the human being you or my father ever were. Robert put a restraining hand on James's arm. James, not like this. For a moment, the office was silent except for Hayes's labored breathing. Finally, James released him, stepping back. You're finished, Gerald, he said quietly. By the end of the day, you'll be removed from every position connected to the Morgan interests. By the end of the week, the authorities will have copies of everything I've found, and if you go anywhere near my mother again, there won't be a corner of this earth where you can hide from me. Hayes smoothed his tie, his lawyer's mask firmly back in place. You're making a mistake. There are others involved. Powerful people who've protected these arrangements for years. They won't let you destroy everything over some misplaced sentimentality. Let me worry about that, James replied. Robert will see you out. After Hayes left, Robert returned to find James staring out the window. He's right about one thing, Robert said. There are others involved, the board members, the medical staff at both facilities. This conspiracy runs deep. James turned. Call Marta Gonzalez. I want to move Evelyn immediately. Somewhere safe, with proper medical care. Then contact our PR team. We're going to need a statement prepared. A statement about what exactly? About how the Morgan Foundation discovered irregularities in elder care practices and is launching a full investigation. James's expression was grim, but determined. It's time to burn it all down, Robert. Every lie, every conspiracy, every person involved. Robert nodded slowly. "And your mother? What will you tell her?" Before James could answer, his phone rang. It was David Chen. "We have a situation at Santa Esperanza," David said without preamble. Two men claiming to be from the state regulatory board showed up demanding to see Evelyn's transfer paperwork. My people delayed them, but the nurse, Davis, is trying to administer some kind of special medication that wasn't on Evelyn's chart. Marta is blocking it, but things are getting tense. James felt ice form in his veins. They're trying to move her. Or worse. He grabbed his jacket. "Tell your people to stop anyone from accessing her. No medications, no transfers, nothing. I'm on my way." He turned to Robert as he headed for the door. "Call our security team. Get them to the facility now. Then call Mitchell in legal. Tell him to meet us there with an emergency guardianship petition. They're not taking her from me again." The drive to Santa Esperanza was a blur. James's mind raced with possibilities, each darker than the last. Would Hayes and his conspirators go so far as to harm Evelyn to keep their secret? After what he'd learned, he wouldn't put anything past them. As they pulled up to the nursing home, James saw David's men positioned at the entrance, preventing two official-looking men from entering. Inside, they found Marta in Evelyn's room, physically standing between Nurse Davis and a confused-looking Evelyn. "What's happening?" James demanded. "This woman won't allow me to administer prescribed medication," Davis snapped, holding a syringe. Marta stood her ground. "Medication that isn't on her chart, and that you can't explain the purpose of." Evelyn sat on her bed, eyes wide with fear at the commotion around her. When she saw James, something flickered in her expression. Not recognition exactly, but a lessening of fear. "The nice man from before," she said softly. James moved to her side, taking her hand. "Yes, Evelyn, I'm here now, and no one is going to hurt you." He turned to Davis, his voice cold. "Get out now." "You have no authority here," Davis retorted. "I'm her medical provider." "Not anymore," Robert said from the doorway, where he stood with two security officers. By order of the Morgan Foundation, which funds this facility, all staff assignments are being reviewed effective immediately. As Davis was escorted out, James turned back to Evelyn, whose hand trembled in his. "It's going to be all right," he promised her, though he knew how hollow the words must sound after decades of betrayal. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her blue eyes searching his face. James felt tears threatening. "Because," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "you once helped me, and it's time I returned the favor." After the commotion with Nurse Davis, James insisted that Evelyn be moved to a private room at the facility's rehabilitation wing, one with better security and away from her regular floor. Marta arranged it immediately, clearly relieved to have an ally in protecting her patient. "I've contacted Dr. Eleanor Kim," Marta told James, as they watched an aide help Evelyn settle into the new room. "She's a neurologist who specializes in memory disorders and medication-induced cognitive impairment. She's agreed to evaluate Evelyn tomorrow morning." "Thank you," James said quietly. "For everything you're doing." Marta's expression softened. "I've had concerns about Evelyn's care regimen for years, but the directives from her guardian were very specific." She shook her head. "I should have pushed harder, asked more questions. Hayes and my father were thorough," James replied. "They made sure everyone believed they were acting in her best interest." The aide finished helping Evelyn arrange her few belongings: a small photo album, some knitting supplies, a worn paperback novel. James noticed that her hands trembled less now that she'd been off Davis's special medication for a few hours. "Would you like some time with her?" Marta asked. James hesitated. "I don't want to confuse her more than she already is. Actually, without the sedatives, she might be more lucid than you expect." Marta squeezed his arm gently. "Start slow. Let her set the pace." After Marta left, James approached Evelyn's bed cautiously. She was arranging a knitted blanket across her lap, her movements more precise than he'd seen before. "May I join you?" he asked. Evelyn looked up, studying him with clearer eyes than during their previous encounters. "You're the man who stopped that nurse from giving me the medicine that makes me foggy." "Yes," James confirmed, surprised by her awareness. "I didn't think it was helping you." "It doesn't." She patted the edge of the bed, inviting him to sit. "You remind me of someone. I've been trying to place it since you first visited." James sat carefully. his heart pounding. "Who do I remind you of?" "I'm not sure yet." She tilted her head, examining his features. "Your eyes, perhaps they're familiar?" James swallowed hard. "Evelyn, do you remember much about your life before coming here?" A shadow crossed her face. "Pieces, like a broken mirror. I see fragments, but the whole picture isn't clear." She reached for the small photo album on her nightstand. "Some days I remember more than others." She opened the album, revealing photographs that had clearly been handled often, their edges worn soft. The first showed a much younger Evelyn holding a baby, her face radiant with love. "My son," she said softly, tracing the image with a finger. "Jamie." Hearing the nickname again sent a jolt through James. "What happened to him?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Evelyn's brow furrowed in concentration. "They told me different things at different times," his father said. She paused, struggling. "He said Jamie didn't need me anymore, that I was sick and couldn't care for him properly." "And was that true? Were you sick?" "Not the way they said." Her voice strengthened with conviction. "I had some bad days after Jamie was born. The doctor called it postpartum depression. But I got better. I loved my son. I would never have left him willingly." She turned to another photograph, a toddler on a beach, laughing as waves chased his chubby legs. James recognized the setting instantly, the Michigan lake house. He had the same photo in his music box. He was such a happy child, Evelyn continued, so curious about everything. His father wanted him raised a certain way, strict, formal, always focused on achievement. We argued about it. Her face clouded. Thomas couldn't understand that children need love more than they need discipline. "Thomas Morgan," James said softly. Evelyn's head snapped up, suddenly alert. "Yes. How did you know that?" James took a deep breath. The moment had come sooner than he expected. "Because he was my father." Confusion crossed Evelyn's face, followed by a flicker of something deeper. She stared at him, really looking at him now, her eyes tracing his features with growing intensity. "Your eyes," she whispered. "They're my father's eyes. I always told Thomas that Jamie had my father's eyes." Her hand, trembling now for a different reason, reached out hesitantly toward James's face but stopped short of touching him. "It can't be," she breathed. They told me you were. They lied," James said gently. "About everything." "Jamie?" The name was barely audible, a question filled with decades of loss and longing. "I go by James now," he said, his voice breaking. "But yes, it's me, Mom." Evelyn's hand covered her mouth, a small sound escaping, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. For a long moment, she simply stared at him, her eyes filling with tears. "May I?" she finally asked, her hand reaching out again. James nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Her fingers, cool and light, touched his cheek. A look of wonder spread across her face, years seeming to fall away with the realization. "My boy," she whispered. "My Jamie." Something inside James broke open, a dam he'd built across his emotions decades ago. He reached for her hand, pressing it more firmly against his cheek, as tears he couldn't contain spilled down his face. "I thought you left me," he said, his voice raw. "All these years, I thought you didn't want me." "Never," Evelyn said fiercely, a strength in her voice he hadn't heard before. "I fought for you. I fought until they drugged me and told me you were better off without me." Her free hand clutched at her heart. "But in here, I never stopped loving you, never stopped waiting." James couldn't hold back anymore. He gathered her into his arms, gently, mindful of how fragile she seemed, and held her as they both wept. Decades of separation, of loss, of lies poured out between them. When they finally pulled apart, Evelyn cupped his face in both hands, studying him with a mother's hungry gaze. "Look at you," she said softly. "A grown man, so handsome, so much like my father." Her expression darkened. "What did Thomas tell you about me? That you abandoned us?" James replied honestly. "That you chose to leave." Pain crossed her face. "And you believed him." "I was 6, James said, "and he was very convincing. He erased every trace of you from our home, from our lives. The only thing I had left was a small music box with your picture inside." "The music box," Evelyn breathed. "With the lullaby, you kept it." James nodded. "It was all I had of you." A commotion in the hallway interrupted their reunion. Robert appeared at the door, his expression urgent. "James, we have a problem. Hayes is in the lobby with a court order. Some kind of emergency conservatorship claim. He's brought a private ambulance team." James stood, positioning himself protectively between the door and Evelyn. How the hell did he get a court order so quickly? "Judge Peterson," Robert said grimly. "An old golf buddy of your father's." James felt Evelyn's hand clasp his, surprisingly strong. When he turned, her eyes were clear and determined. "Don't let them take me again," she said. "Please, Jamie, not now that I've found you." The terror in her voice, the desperate plea, it ignited something primal in James. He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Never," he promised. "They're never separating us again." Robert stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Marta's stalling them. But we need a plan. Fast." James looked from his mother to his most trusted ally, his mind racing. Everything he'd built, every contact he'd made, every ounce of power he'd accumulated. None of it would matter if he couldn't protect her now. "Call Mitchell," he directed Robert. "Tell him to get that emergency guardianship petition to Judge Ramirez immediately. Then get David's security team to the rear entrance. We're moving her someplace Hayes would never think to look." Within minutes, James had orchestrated Evelyn's escape from Santa Esperanza, with David's team providing cover. They moved her through the service corridor to a waiting car. Robert stayed behind to handle Hayes and his court order, armed with enough legal objections to buy them precious time. "Where are we going?" Evelyn asked as James helped her into the back seat of an unmarked sedan. "Somewhere safe," he assured her. "A place my father never knew about." James owned a lakeside property north of the city, purchased under an LLC with no connection to Morgan Enterprises. He'd bought it years ago as a personal retreat, a place where he could escape the constant demands of the business world. Now it would serve as their sanctuary. The drive took nearly 2 hours, during which Evelyn alternated between moments of remarkable clarity and periods of confusion. Dr. Kim had warned him this would happen. The effects of years of inappropriate medication wouldn't disappear overnight. "The lake," Evelyn murmured as they approached the property. "It reminds me of our old place. That's why I bought it," James admitted. "I didn't understand why at the time, but something about the water, the trees, it felt right." His phone rang as they were settling into the house. It was Robert. "Hayes is furious," Robert reported. "He's calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Williams is rallying support from the old guard." "Let them," James replied. "How's our counteroffensive?" "Mitchell got the guardianship petition before Judge Ramirez. She's reviewing it now, but she's sympathetic, especially after seeing the evidence of medical tampering." Robert paused. "The more pressing issue is the corporate situation. Hayes has been working the phones. He's telling people you've had some kind of breakdown." James wasn't surprised. It was the same tactic his father had used against Evelyn all those years ago. Paint her as unstable, emotional, unfit. History repeating itself in the most ironic way. "What's our position with the board?" he asked. "Split. The newer members, the ones you appointed, are withholding judgment. The old-timers, Williams, Peterson, Blackwell, they're with Hayes. The swing votes will be Cooper and Ramirez." James considered this. Elizabeth Cooper had been his father's protege, but had always maintained a certain independence. Miguel Ramirez was a more recent addition, respected for his ethical stance in business matters. "Send them both copies of my father's journals, the relevant pages only. Confidentially, eyes only. Let them see what kind of man they've been protecting." After ending the call, James found Evelyn in the living room, standing by the large picture window that overlooked the lake. The setting sun cast golden light across the water, illuminating her profile. For a moment, he saw echoes of the woman from the photograph in his music box. Younger, vibrant, full of life. "Your father used to say I was too sentimental," she said without turning. "That I'd make you weak if I raised you my way." James moved to stand beside her. "What was your way?" A small smile touched her lips. "To love abundantly, to value people over profit, to find joy in simple things." She turned to him. "To know it's okay for boys to cry sometimes." Something tight uncoiled in James's chest. He taught me the opposite of all those things. And what do you believe now? It was a simple question with a complex answer. James had spent his adult life emulating his father's philosophy. Ruthless efficiency, emotional detachment, profit above all. He'd built an empire on those principles. But what had it gotten him? Wealth, yes. Power, certainly. But he'd never had what the woman beside him had given freely, even while imprisoned and drugged. Love without conditions. I'm still figuring that out, he answered honestly. His phone buzzed with a text from Robert. They've called for a vote of no confidence tomorrow. 9 a.m. What is it? Evelyn asked, noticing his expression change. Business matters, James replied, not wanting to burden her. Nothing for you to worry about. She took his hand, her eyes suddenly sharp. Jamie, I may have lost years, but I haven't lost my mind if they're coming after you because of me. I need to know. James squeezed her hand gently. They're trying to force me out of the company. Hayes has convinced enough board members that I'm acting irrationally. Because you rescued me. Because I'm threatening to expose what they did to you. James corrected. The company, the foundation, they were all built while you were kept hidden away. If the truth comes out, people will have questions about what else my father might have done. Evelyn's expression hardened with a determination that reminded James of himself in the boardroom. Then we fight. I need to be in that boardroom tomorrow, James said. But I won't leave you unprotected. Take me with you. James stared at her in surprise. To the board meeting, Mom. That's not... Let them see me, she insisted. Let them look me in the eyes after what they've done. Before James could respond, his phone rang again. It was Mitchell, their legal counsel. I have good news and complicated news, Mitchell began. Judge Ramirez granted the emergency guardianship petition. You're now legally your mother's guardian. Relief flooded through James. And the complicated news. Hayes has filed a motion challenging your fitness as guardian, citing your apparent mental instability and irrational business decisions. He's also issued a statement to key investors questioning your leadership. James's mind raced. Hayes was attacking on multiple fronts, using the same playbook Thomas had employed against Evelyn decades ago. Character assassination, questions about mental stability, a coordinated effort to isolate and undermine. What's our exposure with the investors? He asked. Significant Turner Capital and Meridian Group have already expressed concerns. Combined with the board situation, we're looking at potential market volatility when the markets open tomorrow. After ending the call, James turned to find Evelyn watching him, her expression resolute. They're using the same tactics on you that they used on me, she said quietly. James nodded. History repeating itself. Then let's rewrite the ending. She placed her hand on his arm. You know their playbook now. You know their weaknesses. Use that. Looking into her eyes, James saw something his father had failed to recognize all those years ago. Not weakness, but a different kind of strength. Thomas Morgan had built his empire through fear and control. Perhaps it was time for a new approach. I need to make some calls, James said, his mind already formulating a plan. If we're going to win this, we need to change the rules of engagement. Through the window, the last light of day slipped beneath the horizon, leaving the lake in darkness. Tomorrow would bring the most important battle of James's life, not for his company, but for justice and for the truth. Morgan Tower's boardroom, with its 40-foot mahogany table and panoramic views of Chicago, had hosted countless power plays over the decades this morning. It would witness its most consequential confrontation. Yet, James arrived early, strategically arranging documents at his usual seat at the head of the table. Robert stood nearby, fielding urgent calls from concerned investors. Turner Capital is wavering, Robert reported, muting his phone. Hayes got to them. They'll come around, James replied with more confidence than he felt. He checked his watch. Is everything in place? Robert nodded. Dr. Kim is with your mother in the executive lounge. Mitchell has the legal documents ready. The press release is drafted. By 8:45, board members began arriving. James observed their expressions carefully. Some avoided eye contact. Others offered tight smiles of encouragement. Stanley Williams entered with Gerald Hayes, both men looking grimly determined. Hayes shot James a look of cold satisfaction. At precisely 9 on, Williams called the meeting to order. We've convened this emergency session to address concerns about the leadership and stability of Morgan Enterprises, Williams began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who believed his position was unassailable. Recent actions by our CEO have raised serious questions about his judgment and fitness to continue in his role. Hayes stood, buttoning his expensive suit jacket. As legal counsel to this board, I must regretfully inform you that James Morgan appears to be experiencing a personal crisis that has compromised his business acumen. He distributed folders to each member. These documents outline a pattern of erratic behavior, culminating in the unauthorized removal of a patient from Santa Esperanza Nursing Home, a facility funded by the Morgan Foundation. James remained silent, allowing Hayes to build his case. He noticed Elizabeth Cooper studying him carefully, her expression unreadable. Miguel Ramirez flipped through the documents with a deep frown. Furthermore, Hayes continued, Mr. Morgan has made accusations against respected members of this board, against his late father's memory, and against me personally. Accusations that are not only false but potentially defamatory. Are you finished, Gerald? James asked quietly when Hayes paused for breath. I've only begun to outline the concerns. No, James interrupted. I meant with your career, with the charade you've maintained for nearly 4 decades. The room fell silent. James stood, projecting the calm confidence that had made him one of Chicago's most formidable business leaders. Board members, before you consider Mr. Williams's motion, I believe you should have all the facts. He nodded to Robert, who distributed a different set of documents. What you're receiving are excerpts from my father's personal journals, along with supporting evidence that my legal team has verified. James watched as the board members began reading. Elizabeth Cooper's eyebrows rose in shock. Miguel Ramirez muttered something in Spanish that sounded like a curse. These journals detail how my father, with Mr. Hayes' assistance, orchestrated the unlawful confinement of my mother, Evelyn Morgan, in 1985. They falsified medical records, bribed officials, and created the fiction that she had abandoned her family. Hayes' face had gone pale. These are fabrications. They're in my father's handwriting. James cut him off. Forensic analysis confirms it, and they're supported by medical records, facility transfer documents, and financial transactions spanning decades. Williams tried to regain control. This is irrelevant to the matter at hand. It is precisely the matter at hand, James countered. For years, Mr. Hayes and certain members of this board have been complicit in an ongoing criminal conspiracy. The real question before us today isn't my fitness to lead. It's how much longer this company will be party to these crimes. Hayes slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. Thomas Morgan acted to protect his son from an unstable woman. My mother wasn't unstable, James said, his voice deadly quiet. She simply disagreed with how my father wanted to raise me. For that crime, she lost 39 years of her life. The boardroom doors opened. Every head turned as Marta Gonzalez entered, followed by Dr. Eleanor Kim and, between them, Evelyn Morgan. The transformation in Evelyn was remarkable. After just 2 days free from the sedatives, with proper medical care and the emotional healing of reconnecting with her son, she stood straighter, her eyes clear and focused. She wore a simple but elegant blue dress that complemented her silver hair, which had been styled for the occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, James said into the stunned silence, I'd like to introduce my mother, Evelyn Morgan. Hayes half rose from his chair, then sank back down as if his legs had failed him. Williams stared open-mouthed. Mrs. Morgan, Elizabeth Cooper said, breaking the silence. I don't know what to say. You could start with an apology, Evelyn replied, her voice soft but steady. Though I understand some of you may not have known the full truth. Dr. Kim stepped forward. I've conducted a comprehensive evaluation of Mrs. Morgan. While she does exhibit some cognitive challenges consistent with long-term inappropriate medication, she shows no signs of the mental illness that supposedly justified her institutionalization decades ago. James guided his mother to a seat beside him. My father and Mr. Hayes fabricated reasons to have my mother committed, drugged, and hidden away. They told me she had abandoned us. They told her I was better off without her. His voice hardened. And certain individuals in this room helped maintain that fiction for years. We never knew. One of the newer board members began. Some of you didn't, James acknowledged, but others did. His gaze locked on Williams, who couldn't meet his eyes. The question now is what kind of company Morgan Enterprises will be going forward. James placed a folder on the table. This contains my proposal for restructuring the board and the foundation. Those who were complicit in my mother's situation will resign immediately. Those who weren't will help us transition to new leadership. New leadership, Williams repeated. You're stepping down. Temporarily, James confirmed. I'm taking a leave of absence to focus on my mother's recovery and to pursue justice for what was done to her. Hayes found his voice at last. You'll destroy everything your father built. No, James corrected. I'll rebuild it on a foundation of truth instead of lies. He looked around the table. My father believed that success justified any action, that the end always justified the means. I reject that philosophy, and I reject the Morgan legacy as it currently stands. Robert distributed another document. This press release will go out at noon, detailing the Morgan Foundation's discovery of elder abuse at multiple facilities and announcing a major initiative to reform elder care practices nationwide. You can't do this, Hayes whispered. The scandal will be significant, James agreed, but so will the reforms that follow. The Morgan name will be associated with rectifying this injustice, not perpetuating it. Evelyn placed her hand over her son's. The simple gesture silenced the room more effectively than any words could have. I move that we accept Mr. Morgan's restructuring proposal, Elizabeth Cooper said suddenly, and that we commence an independent investigation into the matters he's raised. I second, Miguel Ramirez added firmly, one by one. The board members who weren't implicated in the conspiracy voiced their support. Williams and his allies found themselves increasingly isolated as the momentum shifted. The vote, when it came, was decisive. The old guard was out. A new chapter for Morgan Enterprises was beginning. As Hayes stormed out, defeated, Evelyn's grip on James's hand tightened. Your father would be furious, she said quietly. James smiled. I know. That's how I can be sure we're doing the right thing. 6 months passed with remarkable swiftness. Spring had given way to summer, and now the first hints of fall colored the trees surrounding the lake house that had become Evelyn's home. James sat on the dock, watching his mother tending to her garden. Dr. Kim's prediction had proven accurate. With proper care and the gradual reduction of the medications that had kept her sedated for decades, Evelyn's cognitive function had improved significantly. There were still bad days when memories slipped away, but they were becoming less frequent. His phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Board approved the final plans for Evelyn's haven. Construction begins next month. James smiled. After the explosive revelations about his father's actions, he had channeled his energy and resources into transforming Santa Esperanza. The facility was being completely rebuilt and expanded into a state-of-the-art elder care center, with a special focus on cognitive health and family reunification. The Morgan Foundation's mission had been redefined, with elder rights and protection at its core. The legal fallout had been substantial. Hayes was facing criminal charges, along with several doctors and administrators who had been complicit in Evelyn's decades-long imprisonment. The civil suits were still pending. With settlements likely to reach into the millions, James didn't care about the money. What mattered was establishing precedent, creating consequences that would deter similar abuses in the future. Penny for your thoughts, Evelyn asked, approaching with a basket of fresh herbs. Just thinking about how much has changed, James replied, helping her settle onto the bench beside him. For the better, she affirmed, though I still can't believe you gave up the CEO position. James shrugged. It's just temporary, and Elizabeth Cooper is doing an excellent job steering the company through the transition. The truth was, stepping back from Morgan Enterprises had been surprisingly liberating. For the first time since college, James had space to question what he actually wanted from life, rather than what his father had programmed him to pursue. I found something yesterday, Evelyn said, reaching into her pocket. Going through some of my old things from the nursing home, she handed him a faded photograph he hadn't seen before. It showed a young Evelyn with Thomas, looking genuinely happy together, with a toddler, James, between them. We weren't always unhappy, she said softly. At the beginning, there was love. Thomas was ambitious but not cruel. She sighed. Something changed in him over time. The more successful he became, the more obsessed he grew with legacy, with control. James studied the photo. searching for hints of the man who would eventually tear his family apart. Do you think he ever regretted what he did to you? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I'd like to believe that somewhere, beneath all that ambition and pride, he knew he'd made a terrible mistake, but he was never a man who admitted errors. A car approached on the gravel driveway, Robert arriving for their weekly strategy meeting. But rather than coming alone, he had a visitor with him. Dr. Liu is here, James said, recognizing the neurologist who had joined their medical team. I thought your appointment wasn't until tomorrow. It wasn't, Evelyn replied, a mysterious smile playing at her lips. But I asked Robert to bring her today. I have something to show both of you. Inside, Dr. Liu greeted them warmly before setting up her laptop at the dining table. Mrs. Morgan has made remarkable progress, she began. But during our last session, she mentioned something that I thought warranted immediate attention. Evelyn sat forward. I've been having these dreams, very specific ones, about a baby girl. James looked between the two women, confused. A baby girl. At first I thought it was just another fragment of mixed-up memories, Evelyn explained. But the dreams were so consistent, so detailed. I described them to Dr. Liu, and she suggested we do some research. Dr. Liu turned her laptop screen toward them. I contacted the hospital where James was born and requested their records from that time period. It took some convincing. But given the circumstances of Mrs. Morgan's case, they agreed to search their archives. On the screen was a birth certificate. James's eyes widened as he read the details. Twin births, Dr. Liu confirmed. James Morgan, and 4 minutes later, Emma Morgan. The room seemed to tilt beneath James's feet. I have a sister, a twin sister. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. That's what the dreams were telling me. They weren't dreams at all. They were memories trying to surface. She gripped James's hand. I had 2 babies. Not one, somehow. I always knew something else was missing, but I couldn't place it. Robert, who had been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward. I've already started preliminary research. According to hospital records, Emma Morgan was transferred to the neonatal intensive care unit shortly after birth due to respiratory complications. She was there for 3 weeks. And after that, James asked, still trying to absorb this stunning revelation. Robert's expression grew grim. The trail goes cold. There's no death certificate, but no further medical records either. It's as if she simply disappeared from the system. Thomas, Evelyn whispered, her voice breaking. He must have, when I was struggling after the birth, he must have made the decision. James felt a cold rage building inside him, similar to what he'd experienced when discovering what had been done to his mother, but now compounded by this new betrayal. Not only had his father stolen his mother from him, but he had also taken a sister James never knew existed. We'll find her, he said with quiet determination. Whatever it takes. However long it takes, we'll find Emma. Robert nodded. I've already contacted David Chen. He's putting together a specialized team. Evelyn reached for the photograph again, tracing the outline of the baby in the image. The baby she now knew was just one of her twins. Do you think she's out there somewhere? Do you think she's had a good life? We'll find out, James promised. And when we do, we'll bring her home. As the afternoon light streamed through the windows of the lake house, casting golden patterns across the wooden floor, James felt a strange mixture of emotions. Anger at his father's seemingly bottomless capacity for deception, determination to right yet another wrong, and beneath it all, a flicker of something he hadn't expected: hope. For so long, James Morgan had defined himself by what he'd lost, the mother he believed had abandoned him. Now, against all odds, he was defining himself by what he'd found and what he might yet discover. The search for Emma Morgan was just beginning.